And he says, you need to be a tree planted into the rivers of living water because a storm is coming and it's going to be a category 5 direct hit. And if you're not planted into my word, it's going to destroy you and it's going to destroy your wife and
Wow.
your family.
You are only one decision away from a totally different life. Just one. It may be big, it may seem simple, but it can change your world. What is your one decision? In this podcast, I will tell stories, give you tools, inspire you, and hopefully give you strength to make that one decision. Remember that inaction is an action, indecision is a decision. Purposeful decisions allow you to have control over the direction you go. Make that one purposeful decision and see where it takes you. Welcome back to the One Decision podcast with Dr. Connie Swain. Thank you so much for being here today. I have a very special guest, John Arroyo. Hello, John.
Hey, Doc, how you doing? I'm so happy to be here. As a matter of fact, you were my college professor when I was getting my
Yes,
DMin.
yes, it was an honor. It was so much fun. So today we're going to interview John, but before we get into that, make sure you like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and share this video with your friends. When you hear his story, believe me, you're going to want to share this story and then what John is up to now. So, but before we get into it, let's just go to the Lord in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, God, thank you so much for this day, for this time together, and for my dear friend John. Lord, I thank you for the encouragement you give many through him and what you have done and what you are doing with his life. Now, Lord, speak through both of us today. Lord, touch the hearts of the hearers and help them to know you are with them through this message. In Jesus' precious and holy name I pray. Amen. That's it. Okay. Well, again, I'm not going to do too much of an introduction. I'm going to let John introduce himself, but I do want to tell you he's retired captain from the Army, Green Beret, and now he has a ministry, a business. He does a lot of speaking and mentoring, training, that kind of thing. And he's got a website. It's Get Up with John or attackedathome.com. So I will have links to his website in the description. He also has a book about his story, and you can find that again on the website, and I'll have links to all of that. He says on the website, Get Up provides resources for leaders, students, and organizations that are looking for proven solutions. And I know it's hard to encapsulate all you do into just a few words, but you do so much more. I know you preach, you teach, you train, you have done a lot of, you go to foreign countries, you've just done so much. So tell us a little bit about what you do and about your family. I know you're married, you have kids and grandkids. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I'm happy to share that in August, my wife and I will be married 20 years. And out of that 20 years came 3 children, so 2 boys and a girl. We don't have any together. I will say that we don't have any together, but we're like the Brady Bunch. We kind of came together, and the military is what brought us together. And so we have 3 children, and now 3 girls and 1 grandson. And so that is our life. That is the passion right now that's on our heart, is we're watching our children become parents and nurture and raise their kids. The Lord has really put it on our heart for the youth and things like that. So that's my family in a nutshell. I'm originally from Whittier, California, which is the Los Angeles area. And my wife is from Battle Creek, Michigan, which is Cereal City. That's where Kellogg's and Post cereals made. So you can reference that or find that by Cereal City. So if you look up Battle Creek, Michigan, just find out where Kellogg's and Post are at. So 2 different spectrums of the world.
I was going to say across the United States.
Yeah, two completely different spectrums of the world. 2 different completely. We grew up 2 different ways. I grew up in the streets of Los Angeles, and she grew up backwoods country bunk in Michigan, factory life, up there. So, but the Lord brought us together. And so that's my family in a nutshell. I have extended family. I have mother, sisters, brothers, things like that out in California. All of my family's in California, in Los Angeles area in the city of Whittier.
That's awesome. So tell us just briefly about Get Up. I know you're going to go into it more deeply later, but what do you basically do with that? Is it a ministry? What do we call it?
Well, it's a message directly from the Lord. And so it's a message, and it can be a ministry, but it's really a message. It's a message. Jesus told me when I was shot and I was dying on the ground, he spoke to me audibly and he told me to get up. And so
I love it.
The Bible says that the scriptures are all ordained and inspired by God, or really they're all inspired by God. And so we got 66 letters that are written by men and women, that they have prophetic encounters with the Lord, or the Lord speaks to him. John the Revelator, he's on the island of Patmos, and the Lord's just speaking to him, and he says, pen what you're writing. And so what I've done, since Jesus spoke audibly to me, I take what he has given me, just like our Bible writers, those who pen those letters, and I go and I give that to people. And there's so many people that need to hear directly from the Father.
Yes.
So when I tell them get up, I'm not telling them something that I just made up. I literally heard that directly from the Father as my life was pouring out on the ground. And so there's so many people, Dr. Connie, that their life is pouring out. They may not be in an active shooter situation. They're not like in Allen, Texas, but they're in prison here. Right. And emotionally, mentally, physically, those are in transition. They don't know which way to go, and they are stuck. And some of them, because they don't know because they're like orphans. That's probably the best way to say it.
Yeah.
They don't know they have a father. And so going in and telling these people, get up, it's directly coming straight from the Father. And it's like, whatever situation you're in, get up with your children, get up in your marriage, get up in your finances. God is speaking to you right now, and he's saying, get up. And so that's the message of Get Up. And it speaks to the youth right now. The youth, right? The national emergency for mental health is on our youth. Guess who needs to get up? Guess who needs a message of get up? Just some resiliency. And we'll talk more about it, but I failed almost everything in my life at least once. And it was like, I'm the guy that went through or had to recycle and do things the second time. I had to work at education. Some people, it just comes easy to them, but it didn't come easy to me. And so my entire life was about getting up. I didn't have that word then, but when Jesus spoke it to me, I said, okay, I'm going to use it. And
that's it.
And let me just end with this. I was in a church in Oklahoma, and I had told people on stage what God had told me, and the message "Get Up" hadn't come out yet. This guy runs up to me after church, and he's like, get up, that's it, man, get up. And I was like, okay, well, what about it? And he's like, God told you to get up, that's your message. And I was like, it was like God had to like smack me in the face and tell me like, duh.
Okay, I got it.
That's it. Yeah.
That's greatness. That is greatness. Well, you kind of you touched on it just briefly, but I do want to talk to you. Oh, obviously, I want you to share your story about what happened. But first of all, kind of tell us about what led you to get into the military and that experience. What happened? Where were you? I know you went to a lot of places. I know you were in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Fort Bragg and Fort Hood. So tell us about your military experience.
Well, as you asked, what led me to the military? I'm writing a book right now. It's called I Never Heard My Daddy Say. So it's one of the greatest deceptions that leaders, that men, women, orphans go through. And I was an orphan for a long time. And here was the greatest deception. although I didn't have a daddy when I was growing up, I always had a father, right? And so Jesus in Luke chapter 3 is baptized by John the Baptist, comes out of the water, and his father says, this is my son. He affirms him in front of everybody all over the world. He affirms Jesus. And at that point in Jesus's ministry in life, he hadn't done anything for his father to be proud of him, except follow what his parents told him to do. But he hadn't raised anyone from the dead. He hadn't preached one message. And all Jesus could do was really just receive his father's love. And that was it. And so that's all we've ever had to do is receive our father's love. Well, when I was a young boy, I didn't know that I always had a father. And there's many orphans that are out there, which is why I'm writing the book I never heard my daddy say. Although I didn't have a daddy in my home because my daddy died when I was 5 years old of cirrhosis of the liver. He essentially drank himself to death. And my dad should have been a reflection of my heavenly father in my home. But because he wasn't there, I didn't have that reflection of a father. And I didn't know that although my dad wasn't there, I actually had a father the whole time.
Wow.
Like Mephibosheth. So we go to the Mephibosheth story in the book of First Samuel and Second Samuel, and we find out, especially Second Samuel chapter 4 and chapter 9 talk about this boy Mephibosheth. And anyways, long and short of it is this young man gets restored back to the table with the king, but yet his whole life he lived in this place called Lodabar, which when he was royalty. And so for those of you that I don't have time to go through and tell you guys the Mephibosheth story, but he was King Saul's grandson, and he should have been heir to the throne.
Yeah.
And he wasn't. But he had to go live in Lodabar, and his whole life he lived mentally in a desolate place.
That's right.
And so he was restored to his rightful place, and the whole time his blood, and rightfully his whole life he had royalty blood, right? And so he got restored back to where he was, to his rightful place, right? To his rightful place. That's right. So he got back. So that's what happened. As a young boy, my dad dies, and I'm never affirmed by my father. I never once hear, "You're my son in who I'm well pleased." As a matter of fact, after my dad dies, I have to go about life, try to figure out my identity, which most young boys and young girls will get from their father, right? I mean, you often hear it like, "Hey, if a girl's never received love from her father, she'll go her whole life looking for that love that she never received. And it's that emptiness." And so I went looking for affirmation, and affirmation looks like what? It looks like this today, Dr. Connie. It looks like chasing likes.
Yes.
It's so affirmation from a world because you didn't get it at home is chasing likes.
That's right.
On social media. So that's a term that I've kind of coined lately, is chasing likes. And so when I was young, because I wasn't affirmed by my daddy, I was chasing likes. But who were the people that became that affirmation for me? Or who did I allow speak into my life? It was my knuckleheaded friends.
Right.
It wasn't my mom. I had a good home and a good mom, but I chose to give the authority of that affirmation to my friends. And my friends at the time in the 80s and 90s, when I was growing up, they got into gangs. And so what did I need to do in order to get the affirmation for them? I became a gang member so that they could tell me that I was cool, that I was the guy, that I was it. Wow. So at 7th grade, I'm jumped into a gang in Los Angeles. By 9th grade, I'm a teenage father. And by 12th grade, I'm doing methamphetamines.
Wow.
And so, but I have me a praying grandmama. I'm here right now because the evidence, that's it. I'm here right now because I'm the evidence of a grandmama's prayers. And let me say this to your listeners. Grandma didn't go off of what she saw. Mm-hmm. If grandma would have went off of what she saw, she would have stopped praying. That's right. But she didn't. And in 2007, my grandmother died, and I didn't walk into church, fully give my life to the Lord till 2009. My grandma never once got to see her prayer answered. Oh, she didn't know that later I became an evangelist, and that the Lord said, "Oh, Rosie, whoa. I'm not only going to save that boy, I'm going to make a preacher out of him."
Right.
And I just believe I just believe every once in a while Jesus calls my grandmother over and he just says,
Yeah.
look where he's at right now.
Or
Look where I got
she's
this
like,
boy.
excuse me, I can't talk right now. I'm watching my my grandson.
That's it.
I'm
That's
busy
it.
watching John. He's busy. I'm watching him.
Um,
I'll be with you in a minute.
yep. And well, my sister became the hands and feet to my grandmother's prayers.
Uh-huh.
When you're living in a life of addiction, the world knows it, but the only one that doesn't know that everybody knows is the person that's in the addiction.
Sure.
So for
Right.
me, I was I was in the middle of this addiction of methamphetamines, and my sister saw right through the lies, every lie that I gave her,
Wow.
and so she said, you're going to come live with me. And I said, okay. So what she would do is she said, I'm going to keep an eye on you. My mom was very naive. I can really just tell her whatever I wanted. She just believed me. And my sister, not so much, because she was the hands and feet to grandmama's prayers. So my sister would have me stay in her living room. And so I would stay up all night and I would sleep all day because that's what meth addicts do. And so over
Right.
time, my sister was like, that's it. You're not going to do that anymore. So if I slept past like a certain hour in the morning, she would come and she would douse me with water. So I often tell people she waterboarded me in her living room before I even joined the military. So my sister tells me, she says, hey, look, you need to get out of here. You're going to be a loser the rest of your life. And I said, well, what am I going to do? I mean, what do I do? And she said, join the military. And I said, not for me. A couple more douses of water over a couple of days. I said, let's go see the recruiter. We end up going to the Army recruiter. This guy's a used car salesman. And
Yeah.
I take the ASVAB. I take that ASVAB, that, test the aptitude test in order to join the military. You got to score a 30.
Uh-huh.
I scored a 29. So I failed the entry exam into the military. I had to go back weeks later, and I went back, and my recruiter told me this time, like, when you take that test, don't leave no answers blank. So I don't care if you have, like, if you run out of time, just bubble, like,
Yeah.
guess. So I go back and I score a 31. I score a 31 on a test. You need a 30. And so again, I said it in the beginning, I was the guy that I had to do things twice. But let me say this. At that point in my life, I had not crossed an academic stage. In junior high, I didn't graduate. They just passed me along. In high school, the teacher's assistant gave me answers to the test, and I cheated to get through high school. I
Wow.
failed. I failed the entry exam into the military. Well, and here's why. It wasn't that I was dumb, right? We just talked about I have a doctorate degree now. It
Right.
wasn't that it wasn't that I was dumb. It's just I needed that affirmation. And
Yeah.
so I was too busy wanting to be the class clown so that everybody could but pat me on the back and tell me that I was the guy. So I wasn't dumb. I just wasn't applying myself the proper way.
Right.
I was too busy needing people to give me likes.
Right. Right. Chasing the likes.
That's it,
Yep.
chasing likes.
Chasing the
Um,
likes. Wow.
so I end up at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, home of the 82nd Airborne Division. That was my first assignment after I scored my 31, and I told the recruiter, I said, well, I'm not going to stay in. I just need a skill. And the good majority of the men, my brother-in-law, my uncle, they were truck drivers. I said, I just want to be a truck driver. I don't need to be anything else. I'm not staying long. I'm just here for the discipline. And so I become a truck driver in the Army, and I often tell people that discipline that I was looking for, I didn't have to find it anymore. I didn't have to go looking for it anymore. I found it. I found it. As a matter of fact, it found me when I showed up in the
Yeah.
military.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so
So
good.
that's how I ended up in the military. And at that point, and I'll stop right here. That was 1998. It was pre 9/11. There wasn't a war going on, so I'll
Wow.
just stop right there.
You thought you were just gonna tour the world. My daughter, and she's gonna kill me for saying this. My oldest daughter, she was the girl that couldn't leave the house without her curling iron and her makeup, right? She was that girl. She came in, she came in one day from high school and she was like, Mom, she said, I'm gonna join the army. She said, I get to go to Italy. Just, honey. So that's what happens. You said that he's the used car salesman. That's what
That's
happened.
right. That's
But it
it.
was
That's
good
it.
for you. My daughter, thank God, didn't, because that just would not have gone well. So anyway, you ended up going to Fort Bragg, and was So on 9/11, I've never had an opportunity to really ask anybody this, but obviously you're just chugging along serving. What was it like for you as a military person, as a man in the military who loved our country and you're serving when you find out that we were under attack? What was that feeling like for you?
Yeah, it was shocking for everybody.
Yeah.
You know, during that time, there wasn't really any conflicts going on. And as
Uh-uh.
young soldiers, I was a young soldier in the 82nd Airborne Division, and everyone's like, look, I can't wait to go to combat, and I can't,
Yeah.
I want to go and face the enemy. I want to do what I joined the military to do. Um, and so on 9/11, when that happened, everybody was like, well, it's game on. I'm getting ready to do
Yeah.
what I signed up for, or what the military expects of me. Some people want to sign up for college or to go to Italy, right?
Right.
But
Go to
but there's
Italy.
that's right. But the military says, hey, we got you, because if our nation's ever attacked, we need you to respond, right? And so we were ready to go. And let me tell you this, that let me go back real quick, because I want to tell you where I was on 9/11, because everybody has their 9/11
Yeah.
story.
Uh-huh. Mhm.
Mine is pretty profound. That orphan heart hides itself, and it can come out, and it looks like workaholicism, right? And
Yeah.
so
Uh-huh.
all those different things. And people just keep striving and achieving, because at one point in time their daddy or their mom said, you're going to be a loser the rest of your, you're never going to make anything of yourself. And so their whole life they just go after it. I'm going to show them. And that's that orphan heart. So for me, the orphan heart showed itself in my uniform, in esprit de corps, which is camaraderie, going after it, right? So I needed affirmation. I was chasing likes again when I joined the military, and everybody on Fort Bragg, North Carolina, because Fort Bragg, North Carolina is home of the Special Operations and Green Berets and Delta Force and Army Rangers. And so,
Yeah.
well, it wasn't gangs anymore that everyone thought were cool. Everyone thought those Green Berets were cool. So what did I start telling everybody I was going to do so that they could start giving me those likes again?
Wow.
I
Wow.
started I started telling people that I was going to be a Green Beret.
Yeah.
I had Dr. Connie, I had no intention on being a Green Beret. I didn't even know what a Green Beret was. I just knew that everybody knew that they were the best
Yeah.
commandos, and I wanted people to give me that credit.
Wow.
And so I started telling everybody I was going to be a Green Beret, and one of my friends walks up to me and he says, "Hey, why don't you go try out or shut your mouth?" That's a true story.
Wow.
True story. So I said, okay, I'm gonna try out. So September 10th, 2001, I'm taken to a base, or it's a training center, a training location on Fort Bragg, where the Green Berets send those individuals who want to try out. And so I was in Special Forces selection September 10th. And on September 11th, the colonel comes, pulls us all in the classroom and says, today we're now a nation at war. And we thought he was lying. We thought
Did
it
you,
was part.
so y'all
We
hadn't
thought
heard
it.
about what happened?
No, because we started training to try out to be Green Berets. And so we
Wow.
were in a remote location with the TVs off. We had nothing. We knew
Wow.
nothing. So we thought it was part of their scenario, right? You're trying out to
Yeah.
be one of the most elite commandos. And we thought it was part of the scenario, until the colonel really leaned forward and said, if you want to be a part of what's going to happen in the next few years, you're in the right place at the right time. And that's
Wow.
when everybody realized it was real. And let me say this. So that was my 9/11 story. That's where I was. But Dr. Connie, I got all the way to the end of that training. And the colonel, they pull me in and they say, you know what? You did okay, but we don't think that you academically pass our course. So essentially what they were telling me was, we don't think you're smart enough. And so here I go again, failure
Oh,
after failure after failure after
wow.
failure. So I all of a sudden this mentality of failure, never enough, didn't have a daddy,
Yeah.
um, always needing to find my identity, because I didn't have a way to kind of, I guess label, I wouldn't say label myself, but I didn't know who I was because
Right.
I didn't have my daddy, and so many times people just said, you're not going to make it. You're not it.
Wow. Wow. That I'm sitting here imagining that, because there had to have been so many things going through your mind in that moment. Wait a minute, my country is at war. I just did all this training, and now I'm probably not going to be able to do what I have been training to do to defend my country, right? Not that they wouldn't have sent you, but I just can't imagine. That had to have been really hard. Well, then what was the trigger that made you say, I can do this? What made you move forward? The one decision.
Well, I'd say the one decision was I didn't want to tell my children that I was a quitter.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
I didn't want to tell my children I was a quitter. So I went and tried out again. And I had to go through that entire selection process, 24 days of some of the most intense mental, emotional, physical training that ain't, but good thing I was 22 years
Yeah.
old, 23 years old back,
You could
24
do
years
it.
old back then. Yeah. But anyway, the one decision was to give my kids what I never received.
I love that. That's so good. So good. Well, let's fast forward a little bit, because and talk a little bit. I know that you ended up going overseas, and then you ended up at Fort Hood, and I want to get to that story. So kind of get us there and tell us what happened.
Okay. Well, I'm going to tell you this real quick because I think it's important for your listeners. Is I was a Green Beret and I went back and forth to Afghanistan and Iraq. I came back as a mean, angry drunk,
Oh,
drinking a lot, and during that
right in
time,
the
during
math for that.
for alcoholism,
Wow.
and I brought my wife on this with me. And during that time, my wife became a two-time suicide survivor. My wife, because of the drinking and everything that I had brought back, and the anger, I was just mean and angry, and then I was disciplining my kids, and then my wife was just felt like she was in the middle, and she was drinking as well, and so I just want to say some of the adversities. I want to make sure that your listeners hear everything we kind of went through, what we were going through. So my wife attempted suicide twice, and we made it through. And then in 2009, we hit rock bottom from the alcoholism. We go into a church um, there in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and that's when I start that relationship with Jesus, and that's when I believe God begins to call me, and He says, you need to be a tree planted into the rivers of living water because a storm is coming and it's going to be a category 5 direct hit. And if you're not planted into my word, it's going to destroy you and it's going to destroy your wife and
Wow.
your family. So that was 2009. So fast forward, in 2011, I applied to this officer program to go from enlisted to officer. I get accepted and I go to college, I graduate. And I look back now, Dr. Connie, again, grandma was praying, right? So I was telling you that the Lord answered grandma's prayer. So I look back now and I see everywhere, even though I was going through all this chaos, my life was a bit of chaos, but the Lord was walking with me every bit of it. I look back now and the college that I went to get my undergrad was a Baptist college. And I, I when I was there, I didn't realize it. It didn't take for later for the revelation to hit me.
Uh-huh.
And here's what happens when you go to a Baptist college, even though you're there for an arts degree, you're required to take biblical courses. Everyone has to take New Testament or Old
Biblical
Testament or
study,
something. That's
yes.
biblical study. Everyone has to do it. And so the Lord, little by little, was pulling me in, even in the midst of this transition,
I love
right?
that.
And so I had been on at that point when I graduate college in 2013. I had been on Fort Bragg, North Carolina, 15 years, and I asked my assignment manager, "Can I go somewhere else? I want to go somewhere else. I did the Spartan life for a long time. How about go somewhere else?" And I used my head instead of my body. And so I asked to go to Fort Hood. He said yes. And so my wife and I get there in November 2013. And then let's just fast forward to April 2nd of 2014. So now I've been on Fort Bragg or Fort Hood about 5 months.
Mhm.
And it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And
Well, let me ask you real quick. I saw it on your website, but tell the people, what was your role at Fort Bragg?
At Fort Hood?
I mean, sorry, Fort Hood. Yeah.
Okay. When I became an officer, I became a medical platoon leader. So I managed medics, the young soldier medics. Um, that was my job.
Okay.
I went into the medical field, and the reason why I went to the medical field is because when I hit about 10 years in the military, I said, man, how am I going to feed my family later? I don't think anyone's going to pay me to jump out of airplanes and chase
Right.
bad guys up mountains anymore. So I went
Or
into
punch
medical.
someone.
That's right. And I said, well, if I go into medical, even if it's medical administration, management,
Sure.
medical's everywhere. So if I go anywhere in the world, I'll have a job.
Yeah.
That was my plan. So I
Okay.
was managing medics during that time. And when you just like any church leader or pastor that comes on staff, you don't just do your one job, you get many hats. And
Mhm.
so one of the duties that I was given, besides just being a manager of medics or being a platoon leader, was I was given the unit movement officer job. So that meant, like, if we deployed, my job was to work with the Air Force and make sure that all of our equipment can fit on their aircraft, and I can build all the load plans and work with them and know
Okay.
and understand all their systems. So that day on April 2nd, I started a course working to get certified in that Air Force, load plans. And the instructor tells us, hey, why don't you go to your organization, get your information from your unit, so as we're working on our products during the course, you can actually be working on your information. And so, man, when you leave here, you're going to be way ahead of the game. So he said, I'm going to let you guys leave early, so tomorrow, come back with all the information. So I go over to my unit headquarters, and I park my car, and I'm like, I'm trying to go into the office where they would have all that information in our supply office. And so it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I shut the door to my car, and I turn, and instantly I hear shots fired. And I'm on base, and I know that I'm behind security because they checked my ID card in that morning, and the person that had a gun and a badge and all that, I was behind them. So I knew that I was safe. So when I turn away from my car and I hear these shots fired, I'm looking because they sounded real. I knew it. I'm a Green Beret. I've been to
Yeah.
combat,
Yeah.
2 Afghanistan, 1 to Iraq.
Mhm.
I've been there, and I know what shots fired sound like. But I begin to discount the threat because I'm like, well, I mean, who thinks they're in danger on base? I
Ugh.
didn't.
Yeah.
So I looked to my 1 o'clock to where I heard the shots fired. I'm standing about 5 feet from my car, and I'm in a parking lot in my organization. I'm looking to my 1 o'clock. It's where I heard the shots fired, and a car pulls up in our parking lot. So it kind of pulls in where I'm looking from, in the direction I'm looking. He comes in, and I see the car, and I acknowledge him, and I acknowledge the individual in the car. But I turned my head back to where I heard the shots fired because I assumed, dangerous word, right? I assumed that the car was just going to keep going, because who thinks they're in danger on base in a
Right.
parking lot? So I turned my head back to where I heard the shots fired. What I didn't realize is that the shots that were being fired were coming from the car that just pulled up in front of me. So what was happening is, this individual, his name was Ivan Lopez, he was on a shooting spree, and he started in his unit headquarters, started shooting his chain of command, got in his car, and what I was hearing was him shooting at everybody standing outside. So he pulls in the parking lot that I'm standing in, and when I turned my head away from him to look to where I heard the shots fired, just observing, the next shot I heard ripped through my throat. And on April 2nd of 2014, Ivan Lopez shot 19 of us. I took a 45 caliber that severed my jugular vein, went through my voice box, and traveled into my right shoulder.
Wow.
And the driver, Ivan Lopez, he drove off. He didn't stick around figuring out what I was going to do, and he must have figured, hey, this guy's going to die
Yeah.
instantly. So I walk away. I turned trying to get away from him. I think I was just instinctively just trying to get away. I
Yeah.
walk back towards my car, and I fall flat on my face. My life is pouring out. And it was in that moment, Dr. Connie, that, you know, at that point in my life, my career was going up. It was on this it was on this incline. It was going up, man. I was going from enlisted to officer, and I saw myself staying in the military for 25 years and going after Fortune 500 companies, and they were going to pay me because of my experience. But when I was dying on the ground, everything that I thought about, all the materialistic stuff that I wanted to achieve, my bank accounts, how many likes I had on Facebook, the email that my commander was waiting for me to reply to, none of that came to mind, and none of that mattered in that moment. The only thing that came to mind and the only thing that mattered were the people that I sacrificed most.
Wow, wow, wow.
So I'm on the ground, my life's pouring out, and I didn't think about how much money I had in the bank. I didn't think about my career. I didn't think about how I told my wife, let me just give you this life that you never asked me for, but I'm just trying to give it to you because I'm an orphan, right?
Yeah.
So I'm trying to achieve and achieve and achieve and achieve. And really all you guys ever asked was for me, but I'm too busy. I'm too busy trying to achieve and telling you that it's for you, but it really wasn't for you. It was
Wow.
for me.
Wow. Wow. So after you fell down, I mean, obviously you lived and you shouldn't have, right? I mean, God had bigger plans. At what point did you hear him say, get up?
It was in the midst of the chaos. It's a Daniel chapter 3 moment. It was a Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So this is what your listeners need to hear. God didn't stop me from getting shot. He didn't stop Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego from stepping in the fire. What he did is he stepped into our situation with us.
Yeah.
And he's told me, and so I'm on the ground, I'm praying, I'm freaking out. I'm saying, Lord, what happens to my family?
Yeah.
What happens to my children? Who's gonna care for my kids and my family? And I hear this audible voice, John, get up, or your wife is gonna die. Not John, you're gonna die. John, get up, or your wife is gonna die. And so I shrug it off because I didn't understand what I was hearing. And I hear it again, but this time with more urgency. John, get up, or your wife is gonna die. You know, Dr. Connie, if we stepped into the homes of the people that are listening to this, we would get to find out what's going on in their life. And this is what was going on in my life. 6 months before I was shot, when we transitioned from Fort Bragg to Fort Hood, or I went to officer school, and then we were getting ready to pick up. When I finished officer school in September, just prior to me being shot, my in-laws, both of them died 9 days apart. My wife lost both her parents 9 days apart. Her dad of cancer and her mom from an unexpected aneurysm. 2 years before her parents died, her brother died in a hunting accident where her dad loaded his gun, sets it down. Everybody's getting their gear together. The gun goes off on its own. She loses her brother. So she lost her brother, her mother, her father. And because of just family dynamics, her living brother and sister, she lost them too. So when she lost her parents, she literally lost everyone. So here I was on the ground, my life's pouring out, and Jesus says, get up, or your wife, she won't miss this time.
Yeah, she
She
won't.
is
She
gonna that's right. She is gonna take her life.
Wow.
But here's something that's so important for your listeners to hear. Jesus didn't pick me up. He told me to get up.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
That's the one decision,
That's
right?
it.
That's the one decision right now for this podcast. Jesus didn't pick me up. He only told me to get up.
Right.
And I had a choice because, like you, it was easier to die that day.
Yeah.
It was easier to stay on the ground and complain like the Israelites and say, Lord, how could you ask? This is what we would tell Jesus today. If your life is pouring out, or think about the report you got from the doctor or the condition that you've had for a while, you say this. How could you ask me to get up, Jesus? Do you know what WebMD says? Do you know what WebMD says?
Yeah, my blood is all over the place. But
yeah, Jesus, do you know what the doctors would tell me if they were here right now? They wouldn't be telling me to get up. They would tell me to stay on the ground. But Jesus said, get up or your wife is going to die. What if you actually knew what was going to happen to your family
Right.
if you didn't obey the voice of the Lord? Because he told me what was going to happen.
Yeah.
So I just start moving. I get up. I go to grab my throat with my right hand, and my arm doesn't move. My right arm doesn't move. The bullet and I didn't know it at the time. The bullet damaged the nerves in my right arm, so I lost the use of my right arm. But in that moment, I hear this pastor from North Carolina, where I walked in his church in 2009, and he used to tell us, when you pray, pray out loud. And I heard Pastor Dan's voice in that moment. I heard this: pray out loud. The Lord was telling me, I need you to ask me for help one more time, because you're going to need another miracle.
Wow.
So I said, Jesus, help. Like, I tried to speak, but I couldn't. I said, Jesus, help. And so my voice, I had no voice. So I just, out of my heart, the Lord heard me. And I think this is important as well. I was shot from 15 yards away. So that bullet, that bullet could have missed me. It could have hit me in the leg, could have hit me in the arm, could have hit me in the hand, it could have hit me anywhere. But it didn't. Point blank in my throat. Today, what does the Lord use? He uses my voice. So what was the enemy trying to destroy on that day? He was trying to destroy, just like Jesus and just like Moses. Who did he go after when they were babies before the promise? So the promise couldn't be birthed.
Yeah.
He went after the promise. So listeners, where do you think you're going to fight your greatest battles?
Right.
Where you're called to.
That's right.
So if you're a giver, you're going to fight in your finances. If you're called to be a mom, if you're called to be a father, if you're called to be a teacher, if you're called to be a politician, you will fight your greatest battles for the place that the Lord is called to get glory in your life. And every single one of us have a calling, whether you're a military, whether you're a real estate agent, right? Anyways, so I get up off the ground. I hear pray out loud. I pray out loud. I start walking, and I'm just stumbling, just looking for anybody to get to so that they could help me. And I see a soldier walking from a distance, and it's 4:00 in the afternoon on a base that holds thousands of soldiers, but there's only one soldier in the distance walking towards me, and he's getting close to me because we're on the same walking path. And he gets 10 feet in front of me, and he just stops. And his demeanor, I stopped because of his demeanor, and he's like frantically looking around. And I realize that I'm standing in front of the man that just shot me.
Oh my gosh.
So we're standing face to face. He shot me from his car, drove off, got out of his car, and started walking, looking for more people to shoot. I get up looking for help, and we meet on the same sidewalk, 10 feet apart. I stop because he stops and because of his demeanor. And I remember that prayer that the Lord asked me, I need you to pray out loud. So I'm standing in front of this guy, and I'm looking at him. I can't run anywhere.
Yeah.
My life was in his hands. And so what Jesus did is Jesus blinded him. He blinded him from seeing me. He looked right through me. He looked to the left and right.
Wow.
And it was almost like I wasn't there. He turns, walks in the building, shoots 3 more people, walks out the back, and kills himself. And today I'm here, friends, and I tell the world about Jesus.
That's right. Oh my gosh, that's incredible. Such an incredible story. Like, and the thing about it is, after you go through something like that, you have no other choice than to serve him, because you literally owe your life to him. We all owe our lives to him, but you owe your very life, that moment, to him. That's incredible.
Well, yeah, I will say that my want to's changed. So I no longer wanted to go into the Fortune 500 world. All I wanted to do was tell the world about Jesus.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That was it. I had no desire to do anything else.
Yeah. Well, and not to rush along, but I want us to shift into, that's what you're doing today. So talk about what you're doing today. And this month I'm focusing on what I talked about last Monday, was leaders are losers, how sometimes we have to walk away from things. And I know you've had to go through some experiences like that. So tell us about what you're doing today, and your ministry and your platform, and then how you got here.
Okay. Well, what I'm doing today is I'm going after the youth. I'm going after the youth and I'm going after families.
Uh-huh.
I feel that the Lord is calling us to go after the youth. I believe that what Satan does is he doesn't really care about adults.
Uh-huh.
I think what he does is he causes diversion. So he gets them fighting on Fox News and CNN while he's parked with the kids
Yep.
because they're the promise. So if he can get that father that's supposed to father the next Billy Graham to believe that he's a woman,
Mhm.
he'll never father the promise,
Right.
right? And
That's
so
true.
um
So good.
so I'm going after the orphans, right? I'm going after the orphans. We are going after the orphans. We're going after the institution of family because that's where the Lord fought us big time.
Right.
And our family is still being put back together. So that's our mission. And because I smell like sheep, I get to hang out with the veterans and first responders, right? So I'm one of them.
Love
So
it.
as a Green Beret, I can go in those formations. Their pastors are not invited
I love
because
it.
right? And so you get an evangelist like Dave Reaver that gets to go in and go behind enemy lines and bring hope, healing. And then when Jesus is high and lifted up, then he draws all men unto him. So um, I was with Dave Reaver Ministries for 4 years. Right out of the military in 1998, I went straight into his ministry. I was with him for 4 years, and then my kids started saying, "Mom, Dad, we need more time with you guys." And so, in a conversation with my boss, I talked to him about wanting and needing more time, more flexibility for rest and family, and so we came to the agreement that the best thing for us to do was to transition to be on our own, so that as a almost like self-employed, that's the only way that you're going to be able to manage your calendar. So it was collective. We came together. We decided that's what we would do, but it was actually something that God was calling me out of Dave Reaver Ministries, though. He it was just I didn't realize it to the degree. And so when I left Dave Reaver Ministries on New Year's Eve of 2022, I stepped into an Isaiah 43:19. God is doing a new thing.
Yeah.
Right. So I stepped into the new
Hold,
thing.
I knew, do a new thing.
That's it. And here's the thing, as you talk about leaders or losers, there would have been a lot of leaders that would have told me, "You're dumb for leaving Dave Reaver Ministries. Where's your platform going to come from?
Right.
Who's gonna open the door to you? You're leaving an international evangelist to do what? You're John who, right?" And so, but by faith, I stepped. And here's what happened. I end up at a, and this is we're in a Joshua. We're in a Joshua crossover, right? So
Right.
we're going from Passover to Pentecost right now. But
Yeah.
but there's the Lord is raising up some Joshuas right now.
Yeah.
And so I end up going to Troy Brewer Open Door Church, Pastor Troy Brewer. I go to his New Beginning conference in January, and I didn't want to go. I was moping. I was sad. I was like, oh
It's
man, I'm not
hard.
gonna go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I was with Dave Reaver for 4 years, and I'm like, Lord, did I miss it? Did I miss you? I'm sorry. Did I?
Yeah.
And so I didn't want to be around anybody. But anyways, I was encouraged and I felt a nudge to go to this conference. And I said, well, I'm going to go, but I'm going to sit in the back. I'm just going to sit in the back and I'm just going to go and just receive. And so I get there and I'm, I listen, I go. And you said the scripture the other day in the verse from Luke where it says, hey, when you go somewhere, don't go to the front. Wait until you're invited, because if someone more prominent than you comes, they shame you by telling you, "Hey, give up your seat." But when the man comes to you and says, "Come here," you come forward, then you will be brought up higher. So that's what happens. I walk in. Long and the short of it is, Pastor Troy Brewer invites me into the green room with the team, and he's like, "You're not sitting in the back. You're one of my VIPs." And I meet this pastor. His name's Brian Bolt, out of Los Angeles, California, out of Whittier, California, actually out of my hometown. And Brian Bolt, we exchange information. And so I fast forward now to March, and my wife and I are going to California. And I reach out to Brian Bolt and I say, hey, man, I'm going to go to California. I'm going to be in California visiting family. Do you know of anybody that's got an Airbnb so that we could bring our dogs? And he says, I don't, but would you speak at my church? And I said, man, of course, I would love to. I've always wanted to.
Uh-huh.
And but I look up his church, and he asked me to speak on March 29th. And this is, I need you guys to hear this. So I'm going somewhere with this, guys. Please just give me 2 minutes. And so I look up his church and I just begin to weep. So there used to be a church bus. An Assemblies of God church in my hometown. They used to pick up kids and families and bring them to church. And one Sunday morning when I was about 5 years old, 4 years old, I just get, the church bus comes and I get on in my pajamas and I get on this bus and I go. And they call my mom and she comes and gets me. But I believe that day the Lord marked me, which is why for the entire life, my entire life, the enemy has tried to kill me. He's trying to take me out. He took my dad, right? But he was trying to kill the promise. But I believe the Lord marked me that day. And so when I look up Pastor Brian Bolt's church, it's the church where I got on the bus. It was the church. I couldn't believe it. But here's what's so significant about the date. The date is March 29th. Well, if you took the Hebrew calendar and you laid it on our calendar, which is the Gregorian calendar, if you look at the time frame, the Bible says that Joshua crossed over with the Israelites on the first day on the first month on the 10th day, which would have been Nisan 10. So if we were to take the calendars and we merge them together in 2023, Joshua would have crossed over April 1st. But the day that God actually told Joshua to cross over was 3 days before they actually crossed over, which was March 29th, the day I spoke at that church again. But this is what God told Joshua: get up. He said, arise, for in 3 days you'll be crossing over. So the Lord brings me back to this church. But I had to leave Dave Reaver Ministries. If I was a part of Dave Reaver Ministries, I wouldn't have had the flexibility to go home and visit my family. I wouldn't have had that, right? Leaders are losers. So what would have happened? I would have stayed there and I would have lost the promise that God was calling me to.
That's right.
And so I go to this church on the 29th, on the day that God told Joshua, get up. What did God tell me when I was dying? Get up. Now, here's the crazy thing. I'm 5 years old when I get on that bus, and I'm 45 years old when I walk in that church.
Oh, wow.
40 years later, the Lord brought me back to the very spot I sought him. And the word says, if you seek me, you'll find me when you search for me with your whole heart. So I believe that the Lord is doing something so supernatural for us. And I got contacted by Open Door Church to be the speaker for the youth on Pentecost Sunday. I actually had two events.
That's awesome.
I had 2 events scheduled in Tennessee that week and that Sunday. It was already booked, and all of a sudden they both canceled. And that is so unusual for 2 events to cancel.
Yeah.
Right. So maybe 1, but 2, no way. And so I told my wife, I know that God is doing something so supernatural. I'm not doing anything, but I know something's coming. And then I get contacted. Hey, would you speak to the youth on Pentecost Sunday? Well, what has God called me to? He's called me to the youth. So maybe that'd be the day that 3,000 get added to the church.
That's awesome. I love that.
That's what I'm doing.
I love the 40 years. You know, I just want to say this. A lot of the people that follow me do understand the significance, but that is the length of time the children of Israel had been in the wilderness. So when God told him that, it was when it was ending. You know, he said that 40 years was ending. So it was a time to transition. And in the Hebrew calendar, we're in a month, the month of, I think you say it IR or ER. Anyway, it's a month of transition between Passover and Pentecost. So I love, 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 love that. That is incredible. One of the things I do want to talk about real quickly before we leave, on your website, you've got a picture. It's in your media kit, and there's a quote, and it says, for you to move forward, you must go back to the place you nearly died and take all authority away from the enemy. I want you to talk briefly about that and how, just speak your heart on that. I loved that quote. It's so true.
So 30 days after I was shot, I came out of the hospital. I was in the hospital for 28 days, and I told my wife to take me back onto Fort Hood
Wow.
because just driving by the front gates, I had anxiety,
Oh, I'm sure.
and I knew that I had to face that fear in order to move forward. So my wife took me back to the very spot I was shot, and I stood on the ground 30 days later, and I raised my hand and I claimed victory right there in the name of Jesus, and I took back the authority of
So
what the enemy would have stolen from me
right.
mentally the rest of my life. Because if I didn't go back there and get my sanity back and get peace in the middle of chaos, right? If I didn't go back there, then I would have had, I believe I probably would have lived with fear, some
Uh-huh.
kind of fear or anxiety the rest of my life, because I would have always been afraid of something. But I went back there and I reclaimed my identity.
I love that. That is so good. I teach a lot about how when Jesus is standing there in the what we call the Great Commission, Matthew 28:18, and he says, "All authority has been given unto me. Therefore, go and make disciples." And I tell people, I said, if we're a disciple, then in that moment, Jesus is giving us his authority. He's saying, because I have the authority, I'm giving you the authority. Just like when you took the oath, when you joined the military, then when you became a commissioned officer, and as you move forward, anytime someone says, okay, stands in that place and says, I have authority and I'm telling you to go do this, they're giving us that authority. So to go back and reclaim what the enemy has stolen is one of the most powerful things we can ever do in our lives, whether it's nearly losing your life, losing a job, losing a family member, any of that. We have to take that authority back from the enemy, and he has to repay. Yeah,
Right.
that's a promise. He has to repay. Go ahead.
Well, and he didn't have the authority to kill me that day.
Nope.
So no one can pluck you out of the hands of the Lord. And so he
Right.
didn't have the authority. He didn't have the authority to kill me. He wounded me, and in the midst of it, I got up. But I didn't know that. It took me a while to walk that out
Right.
and to understand. And one of the pieces that, in order to gain my peace back and have that understanding and trust God in of what he was doing in the middle of it, that was a piece that I had to go back. If I would have left that puzzle piece out, I would have been incomplete. Here's another puzzle piece that your listeners need to hear. As I was recovering, the Lord I the Lord had a conversation with me, and it was like this: John, in order for you to move forward, you're gonna have to forgive the man that hurt you.
Yeah.
And I was like, God, what are you talking? Like, do you realize? Don't you remember what he did? You were there. I was shot in the throat. How could you ask me to forgive him?
And he drove up to you to do it. It's not like you
That's
just
right.
happened, he was
Yeah.
shooting randomly.
Lord, you saw this. How could you ask me to forgive him? He said, because unforgiveness is bitterness, and
Right.
bitterness is cancer in your bones. And if you don't forgive him, the unforgiveness will kill you from the inside out. And he said, and this is what unforgiveness looks like: PTSD, depression, anxiety, fear, alcoholism, rage, all those symptoms that we see manifest in so many people, right? If you understand, if we're not doing this interview while I'm in the VA wrapped up in the corner in a wet paper blanket,
Mm-mm.
because I chose to obey. One of the things I did is I went back and I took authority back from the enemy, and I claimed and I took authority back when I stood on that ground and said, no, devil, not today. You can't have me. You can't have my mind. You can't have my heart. You can't have my family. Then two, when Jesus said, John, you have to forgive. And if you don't, this is what unforgiveness is going to look like in your life. And so he said, but we both can't carry it. So I said, Jesus, I forgive Ivan Lopez and I release him of the debt. And he says, good. Now there's one more person you have to forgive.
Mm.
You have to forgive yourself for all the people you've hurt,
Oh, wow.
for
Wow.
your children, for what you did to your family. So I still can't use you yet until you forgive yourself for hurting people.
Wow.
So when I forgave the man that hurt me and then I forgave myself, then he said, now you can start healing. Now I'll start healing you from the inside out. And oh, by the way, I'm going to start with your family. Since you're utterly broken, everything in your life is shaken between you and your wife. I'm going to start with your family.
That is so good. Wow. And he did. I mean, look
He sure
at you
did.
now. Look at you now. Oh my gosh, we could talk for hours, obviously. Well, and we have, so in other conversations. But I have loved every moment of this. This is so great. I'd love to have you back on and, sometime. But would you close us out in prayer?
I sure will. So, Father, I just thank you that you hear me. I thank you that you spoke to me in the midst of chaos, in the midst of death, international breaking news, when everybody was wondering, where are you? I can tell everybody where you were. You were speaking to me in the midst of it. So, Father, I just speak right now over everybody that's listening to this, that will listen to this in the future. And I just ask that in the midst of their chaos, that they'll be able to clearly discern and hear your voice as you're telling them, get up. So, Father, I prophesy over everyone that's hearing this, and I say, get up in the name of Jesus. Get up in your marriage, get up in your finances, get up with your children, get up in education, get up in your calling. You're loved. Father, I thank you for Dr. Connie. I thank you for her assignment that you've given her. Father, I just speak a blessing. I speak open doors. I speak favor. I speak resources and finances, Lord. And I shut the door now to every bit of hindrance that she's encountered. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It has been such a blessing. And so, you guys, I'm putting links in the description where you can get all of his information, his book, everything. And please, please, please pray about trying to have him come to your church or to your group. It doesn't have to be a church setting. He could come to your business, whatever. Not just to tell his story. There's so much he didn't even talk about. He was a leader at Dave Reaver for a long time and has helped change a lot of people's lives. So thank you so much, John. I really appreciate you being here. I love and appreciate you more than you know. So thank you.
Thanks, Doc.
Everybody, make sure you like and share this video with your friends. Subscribe to the channel, and I will see you next week.